Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Herbst. I am president of American Jewish University. Today, it's a pleasure to welcome Chris Mundy and Paul Kolsby to the show. Chris Mundy has spent 11 years as a senior writer and contributing editor at Rolling Stone, and then made the transition to television. He's written for such shows as Criminal Minds, Hell on Wheels, and Bloodline. And Paul is a screenwriter, playwright, and novelist. He's written the films City Unplugged and Spread, among others. He's developed TV pilots and written for numerous shows, including Ozark, for which he's received many award nominations. Paul and Chris, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
To be here.
Lots of questions to talk about Ozark, its biblical themes, and the dynamics of the Bird family. But maybe first, Chris and Paul, could you tell us a little bit about the creative process of a series like Ozarks, which has multiple seasons? Do you have a good idea of the arc of the entire series when you start? Does it evolve as you go along? What insights can you give us about the creative process?
I'll start, and Paul, you can join in. I think from the beginning, you're just trying to get through the first season and get to a jumping off place where you can go into a second season, because you don't know if you're gonna have a second season. You don't know how long the story you're gonna tell is gonna be. But then pretty quickly, like in something with Ozark, I think I had a pretty good idea of where we were gonna land emotionally at the very end. I didn't know all the mechanics that it would take to get there. Part of that is you don't know how long the story is going to be. Like if they said you were going to talk for 5 minutes tonight or an hour tonight, you'd give us different speech. So we were kind of always had our eye on a ball emotionally, and within that, we're just trying to tell the most compelling story that helped. Does that make sense, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair assessment of what we do. I would also add that television gets made really quickly. As somebody who worked in features before, where you had, sometimes years to develop a single script, TV, just because there's so much, the television eats material, eats story, that sometimes we needed to make decisions about where we would land, intermediately. And then where we would land in an episode or even in a season, and then have to fight to make those choices work in order to keep the trains running forward, which is a challenge. But I think one that worked for us.
Yeah. It's the fun of it too.
I should note that part 1 of season 4 came out recently. Spoiler alert, we will be discussing part 1 of season 4. So if you haven't seen it yet, close your ears when we get to that part. And Chris, I think you have some late breaking news about part 2 of season 4.
Oh yeah, I actually officially got announced tonight. So the timing is really good, or announced this morning. The final 7 come out on April 29th. So it's the last we got. There will be no spoilers of the last 7, but yeah, we're coming out pretty soon. We're turning around in a couple months and we'll be back.
That must be bittersweet for both of you.
It is. It's been, how many years has it been? Almost
six years since the start of the room. It was the beginning of March, 6 years ago. So yeah, it's a big chunk of a lot of our lives. And I think it changed. It's funny, I was doing a talk thing like this with Jason and Laura and Julia the other day, and Julia was saying that it's kind of changed everybody's lives, and you've made like friends you're going to have forever, and it's changed creative choices you get to make. And Paul and I, we didn't know each other till the start of this, and now we've known each other for 6 years real incredibly well. So it's definitely the end of something in a lot of ways, just personally as well.
So thinking about the show, which I've been a fan of since the beginning, and thinking about themes that we like to particularly discuss on an American Jewish University program, I was immediately drawn to ideas of exile. The Bird family has to leave Chicago because of problems that the father and to some extent the wife run into. They flee to the Ozarks to hide, although it doesn't seem very hard to find them. They don't seem particularly attached to the land or the territory, but they don't leave. They talk about going back to Chicago, but they never quite do. lots of people talk about leaving the Ozarks, but they never leave unless they're killed. So we don't learn that much about the place, the Ozarks, throughout the show, as opposed to we were talking in the pre-meeting about Yellowstone, where everyone proclaims their allegiance to the land and the mountains and the vista. So what's your understanding of Ozarks? Is it just a place to be exiled? Is it a metaphor for something else? How should we understand it?
You want that one, Paul? You want me to take that one?
I'll start and then you'll finish. We were talking before just a few minutes ago about how for some people the Ozarks is the idyllic place of their youth. It's a place where there are beautiful vacation homes where people swim in the lake and have kids go every summer. But it wasn't the place that any of us in the room went to every summer. I know Chris had visited, and we as a group went. Unfortunately, it was not during the season, so it wasn't. We didn't see the sun sort of glistening off the water the way you might. And also the birds, when they went, they were in quite a lot of trouble. So it wasn't like they had a lot of time for sunbathing or boating. So, it became a setting of for a dark story, really. And that was just a function of what we had to do. But I think that there are a lot of people who do love that place and don't see it as the desert necessarily to be exiled to.
Yeah, and I think of it as a story of outsiders and insiders, and so these outsiders come in, the kind of people that would usually look down on a place like that, and then suddenly they're living there, and so they're insiders, but they're not. And I think that speaks to class quite a bit. I think we were very interested in talking about class on the show, and to the extent of any sort of biblical implications. I think it comes from. There's a reason those stories are the stories that are passed that have been passed down. I mean, it's like it's family and it's blood and it's allegiances and so a lot of that stuff just seeps into any good storytelling at all, and you can sort of attach it if you tell a story of families and generations. Hopefully, you can attach some of that stuff.
Have you had reaction from people from the Ozarks? Have you heard from them?
We've had a fair amount of reaction from different people in Missouri, and we knew people on the Missouri Film Commission who kind of helped us. I think the reaction from the Ozarks has been both positive and negative. Everyone wants a story told in your place, and then everyone gets mad about what details are true and what details aren't. In fact, there's one guy, there's a new business there. Someone opened up a business in the downtown, the heart of the old Bag by Bagnell Dam in the Ozarks, called Marty Birds. That's all inspired by the show. So at least they're owning it for sure. So, I like that.
Perhaps the central dynamic in the show is, while the father is the one originally involved in the criminal enterprise, Marty, played by Justin Bateman, he brings in his wife, Wendy, Laura Linney, and eventually the two children, the elder daughter and the son, each are reluctant participants in the beginning, but become enthusiastic participants. In the most recent part 1 of season 4, Wendy Bird, perhaps even more enthusiastic than her husband. Is that a fair characterization? And what are you trying to get to there as people, civilians, if you like, become not only part of a criminal enterprise, but eventually enthusiastic participants?
Well, we talked from the beginning, when you meet this family, or certainly meet the Wendy and Marty in the pilot, they're in sort of the worst place a marriage could possibly be. She's been unfaithful. He's almost killed. He considers letting her be killed. So, you can't, I hope there's no bottom lower than that. And so in a way, we kind of talked about over the course of the first season, in the strange way, crime, if they saved this family, they were all thrown together and they had to hold on together. in a strange way. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it for other families, but
not every family at any rate.
yeah, maybe yours, Paul, like, not mine per se.
We dabble.
Uh, so in a way, some of it was just that. I mean, I think they've been trying to hold on to the family. They're misguided. They're terrible parents. Don't get me wrong, but they've been trying to hold on to their family the whole time, and so owning that and dragging them in was their way of holding on to the kids. Does that seem? And we talked about this all the time,
Yeah, I mean, it was a family that was stuck, and it was stuck in a bad place, and then a terrible thing happens, and they're forced to flee, and the energy in the marriage and in the entire family's, the family dynamic shifts, and in many ways improves the family. In the first case, letting the kids know that this is what we're doing, that your father is working for a drug cartel, is the first sort of honest thing that either of these parents told their children, and then the family is united by a secret, which turns out to have obvious downside, but also a unifying sort of effect. So we did play with that. We also talked a lot because Chris and I both, and certain other people, throughout the seasons have kids, and we tried to always bring this back to this is a real family with kids and these parents, horrible as they were, wanted to see their kids thrive in certain of the same ways that we would like to see our children thrive. They just had a certain weights on their ankles, and that was fun for us.
Is the insight that anyone or almost anyone can become not only a criminal, but a criminal who does very bad things?
I don't know if I'd go that far. I think the insight is that there are slopes that are slipperier than you think. That's hard to say. And one lie, one misstep, and things can unravel in a hurry. And then what are you willing to do to undo it and to fix it? So I think that's very human. I don't think it's usually on the scale of the story we're telling, obviously, but I think people double down and compound lies to get out of situations or bad decisions to get out of bad decisions all the time. I mean, part of what we hope is relatable in the show is they're still trying to be a regular family, and they're still trying to have a regular marriage in the midst of all this. Whatever humor people find in the show is them still trying to do that to an absurd degree, sometimes in the middle of craziness.
TV used to, a long time ago, it still does to some extent, have heroes who were palpably good. Now it's more complicated. Who's the hero of Ozark, or is there a hero?
It's funny, I'll just say this, that I have on my wall, and I've been meaning to read it, but it's an article about sort of the anti-hero, which was kind of in vogue 5 or 6 years ago. We really sort of hit at the sweet spot of this anti-hero trend. And now you see Ted Lasso, from Ricky Gervais to Jason Sudeikis is this trend. But I mean, I think one of the things, just to piggyback on something that we were last talking about and connect it to this, I'm not perfect. I'll speak for myself. I'm very aware that I'm not perfect, and understanding that I'm not perfect, and actually having a real connection with how I'm not perfect is the place from which I try to write, and in this case, we're writing about a family that's imperfect in many of the ways that my family is imperfect, but magnified by this criminality, and so I think on some level there, maybe the pandemic has made it so that people don't want to be confronted, don't want to have the mirror held up to nature. But the truth is that if you do hold the mirror up to nature, I think you're holding it up to flaw, and so we enjoyed the freedom of being able to deal with this family's flaws, in this expansive way, because we were aware that that raising two kids is hard, really hard.
Look, Paul, let me follow up that immediately. I was reading, as I noted to you before, an article in the Wall Street Journal, I think titled Ozark Lessons on How Not to Parent Your Children. And the writer makes the interesting point that, previous shows like The Sopranos or Breaking Bad, the parents tried to shield their criminal enterprise from their children. Sopranos famously so. In Ozark, the parents eventually recruit the children for their enterprise. Does that reflect an evolution of how we see the American family, or where were you going with that?
Is this to me? You want to take this, Chris? I have a thought on it.
Sure. I mean, I think some of it is a product. I don't know that we were trying to talk about the evolution of family in any way. Some of it is a product just of storytelling. Like I tend to, if someone's shielding a secret from someone, whether or not it's a parent, a child, or whatever, eventually every scene between those people becomes about what one of the people doesn't know. And it becomes the same scene. And so I was really proud of one of the things we did on Ozark a lot is we just went right at it. Something that other shows might have just held, whatever the situation, there were a million of them, might have just held for thinking it was tension. We went straight at it, did it, and then looked at what's the emotional fallout of that. Because that emotional fallout can be 20 different things, So it was more a conscious decision to tell stories that way, throw it all out there and then see what happened, more than it was almost a sociological decision.
Yeah, and that's a decision we made, not just with the family, but in
everybody.
With everybody.
Yeah.
Paul and Chris, of course, a big Jewish theme is repentance and forgiveness. Is there the possibility of repentance in Ozark for the various misdeeds, some of them quite awful, that the characters do?
I think there is. I don't think this is not a show that's just strictly about like the hardening of a heart. Like I think there's good in everybody in the show. I kind of like them all, even though I don't like most of the things they do. So I absolutely, I'm not saying there's gonna be, but I think in the real world of it, there would be. Do you agree, Paul, or are they beyond?
Well, I'm not a rabbi, nor have I played one on TV, nor have I actually ever tried to write a rabbi. But I'm under the impression that there's repentance, there's the possibility of redemption for any misdeed, through self-awareness. One of the things that we did was we tried to show how people justify their behavior in the moment, as a way of, again, this sort of magnification of what we do all day long in a smaller way. But I think, for example, Wendy Bird's thinking that she can, that all this terrible criminality, in fact, murder, was ultimately to have the power to do great good, is something that, I think exists in our country, that sort of level of justification and rationalization. So, I think what we tried to do, because we didn't really judge our characters. I mean, we never said, we didn't use the terms bad and good, but we felt like they were human and like I said, very, very flawed, like we were.
One of the stunning moments in the series is, I guess, towards the end of season 3, when Wendy arranges essentially for her brother to be killed. Was that a hard narrative decision to take? Because it seems to mark, judging from part 1 of season 4, a real turning point in her character.
I don't think it was a hard decision to make. I think we knew that early. Like by the time Tom had got the role to play Ben, Tom Pelfrey, who played Ben, like I told him immediately when he got the part what his end was going to be. We knew it. It wasn't like we built to it and we I think it felt like what was hard was to build it in a way where you could understand Wendy's decision. I'm not saying that you would do the same thing, but that you would understand the trap that she was in, that she'd sort of built for herself. That over the course of a season, and then in the particular episode when it happened, that was the thing that was really challenging, trying to humanize it in a way where people could sit in a forum like this and debate whether or not she had any other choice or not, and what would they do, and so for us it was getting that moment. And then Laura was just so good in it, that was just crazy. So it humanized a terrible thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I meant before about how we, I'm not sure, I don't remember it being at the very beginning, but soon after we started to talk about this Ben guy, we knew that he had the capacity to get the birds in a ton of trouble, and that something very serious was going to happen so that he was no longer dangerous. And so that's what I meant. We make this decision, we're going to have to kill him. And honestly, it's an easier decision to make as writers on a television show than to actually do something like that. Like sometimes people would say, like, it's so dark, dude. And I'd be like, yeah, I guess so, but we have a kind of a good time doing it, But it's interesting that choice, because the decision to even bring him in came from Laura in season 1. In the first episode that I wrote was when Jonah was, they were worried he was killing animals. And Laura suggested to all of us, that maybe Wendy has a brother who has mental health issues, and that's the basis for their concern for their child. And that sort of,
it was just one line. It was one line. Like, my brother, his history. And then we spent a good chunk of the beginning of season 2 breaking a story with Ben in it. And then the season just felt overstuffed. And so we dropped it all. And then when season 3 rolled around, we knew he was going to come. But yeah, it totally came from that line in episode 4, season 1.
Yeah. And just because there are religious themes at work, I was aware that there was a certain sort of playing God when you create a character, decide to bring a character in, and you're going to kill that character. It was fascinating, actually, to watch, to know where the arc would take us, and that the challenge was to do it, seamlessly.
Yeah, Mickey would say at times when we brought in characters, like, well, we know you don't want that character that's just built to die. Like, you can't just, like, if people see that the character is built to die, then it's a problem. I always thought about that phrase.
I would say Laura Linney's expression when she sees the posters looking for her brother in season 4, having known what she did, was quite extraordinary.
She's so good. It's like, she makes us look good all the time. All of them do. Her, Julia, Jason, everybody. It's crazy.
We've seen a whole bunch of series, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Ozark in good part, that feature around the drug trade. So there have been forbidden fruits and evils throughout mankind's history, but do you feel that the drug trade, because of the scale of money, the violence, the international involvement, is a different dramatic setting than others, or is this just what's currently part of the American pathology?
It's a good question. I would say, I think it's the same pathology. I think the scale, for the reasons you just said, for the sheer amount of money, the profit margin, the addictive quality and damage that the product itself actually does. All of those things are inherently dramatic and inherently make people make bad decisions. And a lot of drama is built on people making bad decisions. So I think it's that. I think at the underlying baseline of it is greed to a degree, and that can manifest out of a lot of different things. Do you know what I mean? So it doesn't have to be something like the drug trade, but I think the drug trade is something that naturally brings all the elements you're talking about in a really extreme way. So it makes sense that it's a dramatic profession, let alone creating drama out of it.
Yeah, the portal was money laundering. And the reason that money needed to be laundered was because the gains were ill-gotten, were illegal, you know. So and we tried to, I mean, one of the things that came up and that I was thinking about was that there are people in certain parts of the world who the only model of affluence, of abundance that they see is through crime, through the drug trade. You know, you're talking about some really poor parts of Mexico where, like the birds seemingly had no choice. Sometimes these people, you know, they think they don't have a choice. And the other thing, we would always have these conversations. I would always say, like, how much money? So exactly how much money do they have? And, you know, I was fascinated by the, you know, drug cartels, Mexican drug cartels control drugs all over the world. And they don't even know how much money that they control. They're, you know, like hundreds of billions and perhaps trillions of dollars. These businesses are much larger than corporate businesses, and they're so, you know, it's all clandestine. So that was also fascinating to us, this world that no one really sees.
Why don't we go to the audience questions? As I said, just a ton of them. First question from a member of the audience: where did the idea for the series come from?
The pilot was not written by either me or Paul. It was written by a guy named Bill Dubuque. And Bill grew up going to the Ozarks in the summers, and he lived in and working at a particular place that was pretty similar to the Blue Cat Lodge, actually. And Bill lives in St. Louis still to this day, and he was a headhunter in the manufacturing business and knew the business world really well, started writing scripts, and just kind of merged those two things into this crazy tale for the pilot. And so it really did spring completely out of Bill's experience when he was younger, and then and all the business knowledge he had. And then from there, he lives in St. Louis. He's got 3 kids in high school. He wasn't going to move to LA. He actually writes movies, not TV. So he kind of graciously handed it off to us and let us do with it what we would.
Another member of the audience writes, "You guys seem like typical family guys." I think that's a compliment. What in your upbringing, Hebrew school, Bible books, help you tell these stories that are so evil?
Well, I can, you know, I'll just say, when I read the pilot, I responded to it immediately, because I do have this. Well, I think I was voted by the studio in season 1 most likely to actually launder money. I've never done, but I have a fascination personally with the criminal mentality, and specifically with the idea that if my back were against the wall and I had a family to raise, I would do just about anything to make sure that they were okay, which was, you know, the sort of flattest version of the pitch of this, you know. But I was a kid, as a little kid, I was always, I had angles, you know. I was always walking on the edge of maybe appropriateness. Like I had a car waxing business, and I went to huge parking lots and would wax, you know, this much of the car and tape a note to it that said, if you want the rest of your car to look like this, give me a call. And some of the people were pretty annoyed that I had done that. So I was, you know, I could relate to this, and I enjoyed this world, projecting myself into it.
And also, some of fiction is just, you can be in make-believe and keep at a safe distance. I mean, I wrote for the show Criminal Minds for a bunch of years, and which is all about serial killers. And my nice mother in Nebraska would call up and be like, "So how do you do your research?" Kind of like wanting to know if she'd just been a terrible failure as a mother. Some of it is trying to be able to project onto something like in you know, from the comfort of home.
A lot more questions. As I said, one audience member writes about the Ruth Langmore character. Audience member writes, "She seems to become more and more critical to the story. Was this planned or just to develop organically in response to her role?"
A little bit of both. She was our favorite character to talk about in season 1, as we were sort of making up the show. So we really were interested in her, just kind of this 19-year-old girl who's kind of like a feral creature in this kind of macho world. We had no idea that Julia was going to be as good as she is. I mean, it would have been heartbreaking if whoever got that role wasn't good, because we really liked the idea of writing that character. But the second we saw Julia, episode 3, where she really had a lot to do, we were like, oh damn, like that, like we're not dumb. We will, and it instantly became, it kind of was going to be the Langmores and the Birds, but like instantly what was Jason and Laura kind of became a triangle, and we really filtered all our show, all the seasons through all that just by sheer force of her talent, honestly.
I'm going to merge 2 questions from the audience now. I'll read them both. One person writes, it's often assumed that cities are corrupt and that the people in the countryside are more pure. But in Ozark, the rural people are as corrupt and violent as city people. Was this done on purpose? And then another member of the audience writes, is the beauty of the Ozarks contrasted by the darkness of the story a central factor in choosing the location, or it was just about placing big city folks outside their comfort zone?
You want to take a whack, Paul, and I'll pile on.
So the first question, the city and the rural, I think, there aren't that many characters that we depict who don't have the possibility of going into the darkness, city or country. In fact, I remember even there, biblically, there was, remember when you told me, Chris, like go ahead and write sort of a Bible story for Snell.
Yeah.
And nobody's ever said write a speech, but I sort of enjoyed that. But I think we enjoyed playing with the fact that everybody, hopefully, there's that the truth isn't black or white, the truth is gray, and that everybody had, like humans, everybody has a light side and a dark side. And as for the beauty of the countryside, yeah, I think we were, I'm fascinated by, you'll walk down the street and you'll look down a side street and you might see something going on there, and you might see something illicit going on, and then people run away. And I always have this thought that down every street and alleyway, if you know how and when to look, there's something going on. There's some truth to uncover. Sometimes I'm sure it's a beautiful thing, but sometimes it's somebody doing something that they probably shouldn't do, but they think they have to do. And so that's the way I always related to it.
Got some real fans here. So let me ask some deep fan questions. One person writes, how do you decide what music to play during the show, as it seems a bit ironic and satirical? And same person writes, the leader of the Mexican drug cartel seems to be one of the most honest and sincere characters in the series. Was that intentional?
The music choices, we have a music supervisor, Gabe Hilfer, who's really great. I'm also a music geek and I come out of music journalism. So to me, that's my favorite thing, is getting to pick that music. So sometimes we play it for irony. I like something bright playing against something dark a lot of the time. Sometimes we just do it because a particular character, Ruth, listening to only old school hip hop is a good example. There's something that just like becomes part of that character and it just infuses something in that person. So, but we geek out on that a lot. We really, really, really love getting to talk about the music on the show. It's maybe my favorite part of my job.
Well, Dion's drip drop, that's like, to me, the best.
Yeah, I knew that was gonna be like that. Most of these we write into the script. We don't even guess in post like that. Like I wrote that into that script because I just knew that feeling at that moment. I knew what I wanted it to be, and it was ironic because it's such an upbeat song, but it's also the lyrics are dark. So, and what was the second half of the question? Was what?
The head of the Mexican drug cartel.
That was we really took pains to make sure that's a character that could be really arch, and you've seen depictions of that character, and so we wanted him to be a family guy. We wanted him to be working class. We wanted him to be pretty no nonsense and straightforward. Felix Solis, who plays him, is like, I mean, he's so intimidating on screen, but he's the gentlest guy in person. And so that you feel both of those things, I think. And I think that just talking to him at length about sort of the working class roots of the guy, and that's the way he approaches his life, he was able to bring that. So some of it's our writing, hopefully, but a lot of it is his acting and what he brings to it.
Another question from the audience about Jason Bateman and Laura Linney, who seem so perfect for the roles that it's hard to imagine anyone else. So how does it work? Do you write the roles with them, with these actors in mind? Are they recruited and then the actors are formed? What's the creative process?
Well, I'll talk about Bateman. We knew Bateman was Marty Byrde, and pretty early.
Although, but the script was written, and then they approached with a fully written script. They approached Jason to act in it, and he said, "Well, I'm willing to act in it if you let me direct it." So, yeah. But it wasn't written for Jason.
And I'm trying to remember when we knew Laura Linney was playing Wendy.
It was pretty early. I remember talking to her. We were throwing out a bunch of names. Our casting director, Alexa Fogel, who's amazing, brought up Laura. She was close with Laura, brought her up. And I talked to Laura on the phone once. Jason went and had coffee with her because he was in New York where Laura lives. But I remember, like, when it was kind of possible, I remember going into the room and being like, guys, like, I think we're going to get Laura Linney. Like, it's not okay for us to suck at all.
Yeah.
It's just instantly, you were like, okay, we better all be on our game because she is so good. And it was a real leap of faith on Laura's part because there wasn't really anything for that character when we started. And she had to trust that we were going to build that character into something. And God bless her, she did. She trusted us. So
yeah. I know that Bill Dubuque didn't know that Jason or Laura were going to play those roles. Yeah. I knew by the time, and I think Ryan did. I think when we started writing scripts, we knew that it was Jason and Laura. I know. Yeah. I did in 104, which was kind of an amazing thing to be able to write. Not only to know the actors you're writing for, that's always helpful, but to know that they're actors of that caliber. I remember being super excited, just thinking like, wow, this
exciting and terrifying.
Yeah.
Chris and Paul, we could talk for a long time, and I'm afraid I've only gotten to a small portion of the questions from the audience, but we have to call at this point. Thank you so much.